Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Future of Space. I'm your host, Daniel Fox. Our guest today is Christina Korp. Christina is an astronaut manager, space advisor, founder of Space for a Better World, and the president of Purpose Entertainment. For 10 years, she's managed Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin, and in 2015 launched his education foundations, ShareSpace and the Aldrin Family Foundation. She works with Apollo 16 moonwalker Charlie Duke, the former NASA astronauts Nicole Stott, Susan Kilrain, and inspiration for mission pilot and SpaceX astronaut Dr. Sian Proctor. Christina, it is a pleasure to have you on the Future of Space.
Thank you, Daniel. Nice to see you.
We got so much to talk about, but before we go there, could you share with us 3 words that capture the essence of space for you?
Well, for me, it has to be Earth, Moon, Mars, are my 3 words.
You wanna give a little bit more of a thought process why you came up with those 3 celestial beings?
Yes. So for a long time, obviously, I'm an Earthling, and then I worked with the moonwalkers, and the moon was really become quite a central figure in my life. But then also for many, many years, going to Mars and Mars missions. I know more about Mars missions than I ever wanted to know. So Earth, Moon, Mars have really been where my orbits have been for the last 12 to 14 years.
Now, you're an Earthling. If given the opportunity of going to the moon, would you take it? And if Mars presented itself, would you do it?
I would absolutely go into the moon if and when it becomes possible for more people. I do not have any desire to go to Mars.
Just because of the time commitment, or because for other reasons?
Yeah, so I know more about Mars missions than even a lot of people who actually study Mars, because I heard about it all day, every day for years with Buzz Aldrin. So I know quite a bit about what the commitment is to go to Mars, and it's the mission is a long mission. Buzz always believed that if you were going to Mars, you were not coming back. Maybe people will be able to come back, but it is seriously like a several-year commitment at the very minimum. And because I'm a mom and I have kids, I'm not really willing to leave my children forever, and take that chance of forever. Where at least if you go to the moon, you can go do the moon in like 8 days and spend a good day and a half on the moon and come back and you're still all right timing wise. So it's a lot easier to rescue somebody at the moon than Mars.
Christina, you've had a, a, a particular place in the space story, right? You started in the art world, and then you moved into the space world and managed Buzz Aldrin, and really got to hear and connect and experience what space represented for his generation, for the people that he involved, but also his place in the history, and of the past, and the present, and the future. What is for you the human story of going to space?
Well, so first of all, I've always had this desire to explore. I think that a lot of people kind of are born with that. I knew when I was a little kid that I wanted to explore and that I wanted to go all over the world. And I think that it's just in our human nature, our curiosity to go and do something maybe that people have never done before, or see things that you've never gotten to see before. So I think humans just are that way anyway. We're going to go see what's on the other side of a valley. We're going to go to the highest mountain. We want to go to the bottom of the ocean and see what's there and see what we can learn. So going to space is just a natural progression of that, I believe. And I think that explorers shared this sense of wonder, or this sense of discovery, of wanting to see what's out there and learn more about we as humans, or how life originated and all of that. But so I think that I had this natural tendency to sharing this kind of vision of wanting to be a discoverer, an explorer. And then, but I will say, it wasn't the plan for my life to work with astronauts. It's not like I grew up thinking I'm going to work in space. I want to be an engineer or scientist or anything like that. My grandma always really loved astronomy. So we always had that kind of fascination with the stars and looking up at the moon and all of that. But I can't say that it was an obvious pathway for me to get into space. Now, all of that being said, when I did fall into space, which was me answering an ad in the Hollywood Reporter to work with Buzz Aldrin, what became very clear to me very quickly was that we had very complementary skills. Me being a media messaging marketing person, and with a very, very awkward engineer who's a genius and who has this vision for the future of space exploration. So I think that was a perfect marriage of our skills of bringing together, you know, someone who, two people who shared this sense of discovery and of exploration and wanting to explore the unknown, but from totally different angles. And I think that that's a strength that has to be brought together more in the future with people who work in space, not just the scientists and the technologists and the engineers and even the people who want to be astronauts, but the people who are a lot like me who love space and maybe never, thought of space as an avenue for them.
And what did you discover working with them that you didn't expect? Obviously, it was a job. You did your research after answering to the ad, and just to make sure that you had all the information. But getting the job and doing it for a long time, what was these unexpected discoveries that really made that journey so precious and incredible for you?
Well, I think the biggest thing, number one, is I did not know when I started working with Buzz Aldrin that there were more than Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin who walked on the moon. And I think that I'm not unlike a lot of average Americans or average people who did not, especially like the conspiracy theorists who say we didn't go to the moon, think that there was one moon landing. There were 6 moon landings. We went to the moon 9 times. So that was something I learned very early on, which was like, holy moly, I didn't know that we went to the moon 9 times. And then, of course, once you learn that, then it makes you curious about the rest. Like, well, why did we go to the moon 9 times? Like, what did we do there? And then, of course, being welcomed into this world of Apollo astronauts, the ones who actually carried out the missions, and then the people in mission control who, made the missions happen. The thing that I think probably has been the most surprising for me, though, is, I've had many people say to me, astronauts are the elite humans. And sometimes people don't like this when I say it, but I say, no, they're humans. They're regular people when it comes down to it, but they share this sense of willingness to take a risk. And I think that that's a very admirable quality of people who are willing to put themselves out there and try again and not give up. So that was actually a pleasant surprise to me too, because as accomplished as many of these people are, when it comes down to it, they're humans. They're humans like the rest of us. They have a lot of the same flaws that the rest of us have, but they share this sense of willingness to take the risk. And it's something I really admire. And I guess I see in myself too, because a lot of people, when they would say, how'd you get this job? I would say, I applied for it. And they'd say, oh, I wouldn't even have the guts to do that. And that's the thing, is like, I figure, what have I got to lose? Put myself out there and got this amazing, incredible adventure.
What did you discover that Buzz meant for, as you travel with him, and obviously the audience changed through those years, changed or were different at different times. I'm pretty sure that Buzz also connected with a younger generation. So what did he represent for the people of his time that witnessed his accomplishments on the moon, but also for the other generations who did not witness but know of him? So what did Buzz represent for them?
Well, so first of all, I wasn't born when the moon landings happened. I don't know if you were either. And so I think that for the people who were alive, who remember it, it's a very special moment in history where even though the moon landings were driven out of the space race, what it did was unite the world. And that's where I've been very privileged to have been the fly on the wall of the lives of the Apollo astronauts in many, many different countries, and see like this spark light up in someone's eyes when they talk about the moon landings and what it meant to them or what their memory was of it. And so what I always say, those missions created the game changers of today, the people who are changing the world today, the Jeff Bezoses and the Elon Musk. Elon wasn't born either, but clearly he was influenced by that. The Google guy is Richard Branson. some of the people who are really making a huge change in the world, that was what lit their spark, was the Apollo moon landings. So, obviously Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, they have the most well-known names in the history books. So kids every year all over the world learn about the Apollo moon landings. And I think that that's something that young people, but there's a age gap that Lego calls the dark ages, which is like when teenagers hit a certain age until their mid 20s, where they don't care about certain things, they kind of lose them, they're, whatever, but then they come back to the things that really inspired them, like space. And so when I came on with Buzz, you know, he really knew that he had to try to connect to the young people, but he didn't really know how to do it. And that's where I thought, you know what, you've got to do things that are out of the box, that are not what other astronauts do or what other people expect you to do as an old Apollo moonwalker, and try to get the attention of these young people who I think are really fascinated by space. And that's why we created the Get Your Ass to Mars campaign, because that really threw people off to see like an icon like Buzz Aldrin, you know, get your ass to Mars. It's like not what people would expect from someone like him. But he really embraced it. He's always had a really good sense of humor. And that irreverence about himself and not taking himself too seriously, I think really helped get people interested in it. And then, of course, now in recent times, SpaceX and Elon Musk and what they're doing, the acceleration of space travel, is exciting people again, and sending people to space again from American soil. For a long time, I think people thought, well, I know people thought NASA ended. They thought it shut down because we had to send our American astronauts to Russia to launch to our space station. So I think it's an exciting time where young people now are paying attention again, because there's a lot of exciting things happening in space. And so I'm hoping that that continues. I think it will continue, but my mission, of course, is to try to invite more people like me, more women and more diverse people, to come and be a part of this ecosystem, the space ecosystem.
Well, I think the fact that you and I, who are not space people, having this conversation proves a point that I think that the story, the dialogue is growing in reach and getting into places that maybe 5 or 10 years ago we would have not thought about that. Before we move on to what you're working on right now, I just want to finish with Buzz. Because when we think of astronauts, obviously, just like you said earlier, we think of these superhumans who can keep their cool in dangerous situations. They have athletic capacities that we think are unmatched. But she said also that Buzz was a genius, which is kind of not a term that we would associate with astronauts. We would think of the people who work at the consoles more geniuses. But why do you say that Buzz was a genius?
Well, this has become kind of a mission of mine, because a lot of people don't realize about him. So like you were saying, the astronauts, the original selection was you had to be a test pilot. And so, meaning you had to be cool under pressure, you need to be able to test, really extreme environments, be able to handle heavy G's, not panic, be very cool under pressure. That's exactly what Neil Armstrong was like. And most of them were engineers. But the difference with Buzz was he was the first with a doctorate. And so when the space program had started, his friend Ed White, who was from Apollo 1, had applied. They'd gone to West Point together, and then they were fighter pilots together in Germany. But Buzz went to MIT to get his doctorate in astronautics. And his friend Ed White had applied to be an astronaut and had got selected. Buzz applied, and he didn't get selected because he wasn't a test pilot. And so the first time he applied, he didn't get it. And then the thing was, though, that they, as the Hidden Figures movie showed, they were still trying to figure out trajectories. How do you get somebody back safely without them burning up in the atmosphere? And so what they also did not know how to do was rendezvous spacecraft. And so there was a guy named John Houbolt, who was a very brilliant engineer, who was the one who came up with the idea of launching multiple segments on one rocket, so you wouldn't need multiple rockets for every element that they would launch. The problem with that was, though, even if you launched all of that, you had to figure out how to get these things to rendezvous, to be able to join up and to actually be able to dock. And how do you do that when they're both going 17,500 miles an hour? So Buzz's fighter pilot experience is what helped him figure that out. Is at MIT, his doctoral thesis was manned orbital rendezvous. It was about how using his fighter pilot experience of intercepting enemy aircraft to try to get somebody who's moving just as fast as you are to get them on the right trajectory so that you could dock. So when I say genius, is that he literally figured out the math of how you rendezvous spacecraft in orbit. And they use his method all the time now. At the space station, anytime they dock a spacecraft, that is Buzz Aldrin's method based on his MIT doctorate. But most people don't know that. And so when, it's one of those things where I always say to him, you may not get the credit till you're gone, because the heavy duty space geeks know that, but a lot of people outside don't understand that was his expertise. And so when he talked about Mars missions, it was about using gravity assist to swing around planets, figuring out the trajectory of being able to do it in such a way that it would swing you around so that it would set you on the right course to go to another planet. And again, this is the kind of thing that he could do in his head. He could do the math in his head and with intuition. And so I've met people at NASA Ames before who have said, who are PhDs, who do orbital dynamics, who understand, how to do this. But they've all said to me, you don't understand why he's our hero. We all have PhDs. We're all smart people, but we need the computer to do it. He can figure it out in his head. And not only that, he can figure it out with intuition in a way that nobody else has really ever been able to do. And even sometimes he suggested trajectories and people are like, it ain't gonna work. And he's like, just try it with this. And I've been a witness to this before where they've tried his method and then they're like, wow, it works. And it saved this much time. And so that's why I say he's in a different category than the rest. And he doesn't really get the credit for his contribution because first of all, I think it's something that maybe, once he's gone, maybe others can advocate for him like I can to try to get people to understand his contribution wasn't just that he was a lucky fighter pilot who got on Apollo 11 and got to walk on the moon, but what he figured out with his doctoral thesis was critical to the success of the Apollo missions and is critical to the way that we do space travel today and to the International Space Station.
Well, I'm pretty sure that there will be a movie or a book there has to be a way to share with the world the impact and the knowledge that he brought into this major milestone that our species is about to take. Not only was he part of the first one on the moon, but I don't think, like the others that you've been with, we would not be here had it not been for that, extremely important piece of the puzzle. Was there anything else that he envisioned, that he understood, that he brought to the table that's going to be defining as we move maybe to Mars or to the moon?
Well, he has a whole plan for having a permanent presence on Mars, and not everybody agrees with it. We went and met with Elon Musk one time to try to show him, and he did not want to see it. And so, I could do like hours and hours of explaining what Buzz's vision for the future is, but there's a simpler way to see it. And so I'm very proud of my role in this. We produced a virtual reality experience called Cycling Pathways to Mars. It's a free experience if you have Oculus and you have HTC Vive. It's on the Time Life VR app and it's free. And it's a 10-minute experience. And it was my way to try to show people what his long-term plans were about permanent human presence on Mars and to understand why we need to go back to the moon and how that enables us to go on long duration missions beyond the moon, but to Mars and beyond and stuff. So I think that, that's the thing is there's so much information that it's almost easier to do something like that. Watch that, we won the Webbies for it. We won the People's Choice and the Technical Webby for it. And we were nominated for an Emmy for that virtual reality experience. But the thing I'm most proud of is that very influential people I saw that you just met, Gerstenmaier, who used to be at NASA, Bill Gerstenmaier, known as Gerst, who is now at SpaceX. When I showed that experience to Gerst and he took off those goggles, he's like, I finally get it. I finally see what he's trying to do. And so I encourage you, if you've never seen it, to go and try that experience because I think it'll give a good handle on what his vision for the future is and get people to understand what he devoted so much of especially like the last 15, 20 years of his life to trying to plan Mars missions.
Well, we'll make sure that we have the links in the description, and I have my Oculus standing by when we end this conversation, that we'll go and experience it. I have my meta close by. I have to be correct now. So
Yeah.
leaving the button, because I agree with you. We could spend several hours just discussing, the bus story and you in it and what you brought to the story. But I also want to spend most of the time discussing what you've been working on your own, what you've been developing, what happened in London recently, all the buzz around your work, and Aim Higher, the installation that happened last year, and where you're going with that. So can you share with us what you're working on right now and what you're trying to achieve?
Sure. So, since the time with Buzz and I left the Aldrin family altogether in December of 2019, I knew, because of the last 5 galas at Kennedy Space Center that I had produced, that I'd begun to meet a lot of women, a lot of female pioneers who were the first in mission control, the first in Kennedy Space Center, the first, to do this and that. And I thought, I'd been privileged to meet Sally Ride. We did a campaign with her for Louis Vuitton back in 2009. So I've been very lucky to have met a lot of the women who were the pioneers in space. So I started realizing, wow, I didn't think about it for a long time, but I often was the only woman in the room as well in many, many meetings with Buzz and other leaders of space. And I began to think, well, maybe there's something here that I can start to use what it is that I do to raise awareness or encourage more women and girls to go into space. So I started planning to do things in that realm as well as education. I love kids. I have my own kids. I have a young daughter and son, but I'm also one of 10 children. And so I have a lot of nieces and nephews, and I really love children. So I wanted to do a lot of things to try to inspire young people through what I've learned and this perspective that I have of being so deep in the space world. So I then focused on women's diversity, inclusivity, equity type of projects for the past couple of years. And I decided, after going to Atlanta a few times, I had so many people ask me, has there ever been a Black astronaut? And so, of course, I know Mae Jemison. I've known her for a really long time. But I thought, you know what? I want to show people in this community the second Black woman who went to space. I want to showcase that she's got the most days in space of any Black woman. She's been to space 3 times, and she's still a current NASA astronaut. And her name is Stephanie Wilson, and she should be a household name, but she's not. But more than anything, I really wanted to do a giant art project to try to get people's attention. And then I partnered with Atlanta Public Schools and Georgia Tech, and using big art statements to get people's attention about a real person, but then hopefully also showcase in the community what's possible for pathways for them to go into space. So that's one part of what I'm doing, and through my new nonprofit, Space for a Better World. And then what I really, really want to try to do in my new tagline is connect the space curious with the space serious, because I am deep in space. I deal with the most serious people doing big, big, big things in space. I know a lot of them, the astronauts and people at space agencies. But I also still have like half of my life still in entertainment, media, and mainstream, and all of my friends and my family. And I've dealt with a lot of major brands who've done a lot of big space themed activations, who are not necessarily technical people, but they love the wonder of space. And so I joined forces with Nicole Stott, who's a NASA astronaut, has the Space for Art Foundation. We have a very joint shared mission. I call her my partner in purpose, and using art to try to inspire people, art and the wonder of space exploration. So we're partnered on a lot of projects, and we're trying to do some messaging together that tries to get people outside of space understand what's going on in space, or how it relates to them, how it benefits their life, that sort of thing. The gala I just did in London was to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Apollo 16, with the 10th man to walk on the moon, Charlie Duke. But then I also really wanted it to not just be about celebrating a past event. There's a JFK quote that I love, which is, "We celebrate the past to awaken the future." So while celebrating this historic anniversary, I really want to look to the future and what has transpired and then what's coming up. And so at that event, we had 11 astronauts, including 6 female astronauts. I have to say, for me, it's probably the only event I've ever been at. There's more female astronauts than male astronauts. So I was really excited to do that, and I love the camaraderie between the female astronauts, and so I want to do more of that. I might be doing the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17. I don't know. We'll see. Working on it, but working on some more outreach projects coming up through Space for a Better World. The Aim Higher project is kind of more the inspiration of trying to inspire young people to aim higher for their dreams. The moon landings, I think, are the perfect example of aiming higher than just the sky, aiming for the moon, aiming for beyond, and what that means. So not just aiming for one particular goal, but aiming higher than maybe you thought was possible for you before. So that's the spirit of Aim Higher.
Well, first, congratulations on gathering all these women astronauts together. I mean, I would assume it was the first time that all these first astronauts got together. I mean, you had Chinese astronauts, you had US,
Korean,
you had.
no
I mean, Korean?
no Korean, no
Can
Chinese.
you list the list of all the women astronauts?
Yeah, so we had two female NASA astronauts. Let's see, I have to go back. Yes, we had two female NASA astronauts. We had two SpaceX astronauts, Sian Proctor and Haley Arsenault from the Inspiration 4 mission. We had the only South Korean astronaut ever who is a woman, So Young Yi, and we had a JAXA Japanese astronaut, Naoki Yamazaki. So those were the six women that were female astronauts that were at the event.
Well, congratulations, Christina. Can you work with Nicole, who's chosen to work with art to reach out to younger generation? Sian Proctor is also an artist and poet, and art is really at the center of her message. I've spoken to Chris Hadfield, who, despite being one of the most famous astronauts, considers himself first and foremost an artist. You come from an artist background, you were in music. Why do you think? I mean, I have my own personal opinion why art is important. I think that was one of the success of the Renaissance is because art was really at the center of it. Why do you think art is such an important component of that human story and of the space story where we're going next?
Well, I think first of all, art is just something that people love. Music, art, different forms of art, storytelling. That's just something that we as humans naturally, I think, gravitate towards. So I don't think it's necessarily something that's separate. I think there has been a little bit of a disconnect where there's so much focus on becoming a STEM professional that there's this perception that you just got to be good at these things, and that's just not the reality. People are really multifaceted, and so even though the astronauts that you mentioned, and even you and I being interested in art, it's not actually an anomaly. It's not the outlier. Actually, I know way more of the astronauts who are also musicians or artists or something, and people just don't know this about them. And I think that's why Nicole and I like the statement that she says, which is, why can't we use our whole brain? Why are people encouraged just to use the technical side of their brain? People are not that cut and dried. There's, yes, some people have strengths in one area or the other, but some people like me, I'm actually quite equally inclined both technically and artistically. And I think that that's really what tends to be the reality of space explorers. A lot of astronauts take their instruments up, they take things up to paint, or they take things up to enjoy art and storytelling. And so I think that just needs to be told a little bit more. With the STEM movement, I think the focus has been so much on the technical, but I personally want to tell a much more well-rounded story about who humans are, because even Alexei Leonov, who was the first human ever to do a spacewalk, the Russian cosmonaut, he was sketching when he was in space. And when he did Apollo Soyuz, he was sketching portraits of his fellow astronauts, including Tom Stafford from Apollo 10. They became lifelong friends. But I mean, he was always an artist as well. I mean, Michael Collins from Apollo 11, he was an artist as well. And so I think it's more so like maybe the artists need to be the one to kind of draw attention to that they all were already doing these things. This is not something new, but it's just not necessarily where the focus has been. And I think that their strength lies in the creativity and the creative thinking that comes along with having art be a part of all of it. I think it's a natural thing. It just has to be drawn attention more to that again, instead of just purely the STEM focus.
I think with the if we go back in time and the birth of the scientific revolution, we became kind of obsessed with the quantitative, the things that can be measured, because it's, it's a satisfying feeling, because there's an immediate gratification of accomplishment, right? You do A plus A, it gives you something, but then the qualitative, the non-descriptive goes to the back burner, and becomes less of an attraction, because the impact of art, the impact of even love, the impact, those are long-term, less quantifying, important aspect of our lives, but it's also where the richness comes through, where the unexplicable comes through, where the discoveries that you didn't anticipate, comes through. And I think that's one of the reasons it is so important to bring art. And, you're talking about STEM, but now a lot of people are talking more about STEAM, because the art is in it. And I do believe that if we want to unite the stories and this dialogue as we move to the next phase, we need to put the art and the artist at the center of it. I think that artists have a purpose in our society. They're meant to be on the fringes of society, because it's their role to remind us of different perspective. Because if you're like in a 9 to 5 grind and you're just constantly worrying about the bills, it's really hard to step back and see the bigger picture. And I've always encouraged. I was talking to other artists, where like patronage should come back, because we should identify these artists that we value and give them. Listen, you have a year. Here's a year to do what you do best. We don't know what you're going to be doing, but what you're going to be doing will help us see things in a different way. Would you agree?
Absolutely. I mean, I always say, first of all, music, art, love, or creativity, those are the things that we live for. There are a lot of people, yeah, you've got to go and do a job, and maybe you're crunching numbers or whatever, and some people get pleasure out of that, but most people, I think, or a lot of people, I should say, it's just what they do to basically survive or make a living. But ultimately, then what? They go home and they watch the movies they want to watch, or they listen to the music they want to listen, or they paint, or they, enjoy the things that really bring pleasure to them, or being creative. And I have to say, I mean, when, the biggest strength that I think we have in a lot of the countries that have progressed is the creative thinking. The interesting dynamic of in the position that I've been in with Buzz, of having traveling to China. There's been a law for a long time, and we don't have to go into it, but the Chinese and NASA cannot speak to each other. There's a law that prevents, if you work for NASA, you're not allowed to speak to anyone in China. So every time there was a space event or space gathering, it would often be me and Buzz, or me and Andy Aldrin and Buzz. We're the only Americans there representing, America in any capacity with all of the other nations on Earth. And we had a meeting with Yang Liwei, who's the head of the Chinese space program, human space flight program. And he said to us, look, we know in our culture, we do not we do not promote creativity. We promote getting the numbers right, learning by rote, figuring out how to do something and do it really, really well, and maybe even taking something that someone else has created and enhancing it or improving it technically. But we don't promote creative thinking and open free thinking. And so we struggle with coming up with new ideas. We can copy what others do, but we struggle to think of something new ourselves. And I think that's a really important message for people to understand, that you can't just focus on the technical. You really need to promote free thinking and creative thinking and doing something that nobody's ever done before. It's kind of the crazy people who have led us down a path of discovering something we never knew how to do before. And I think, that's where, again, we've got to get back to that, like you were saying, to letting people just create without an end goal, like see what they can come up with and letting their minds wander. There's been stuff in the past few years about the value of letting a kid be bored. Like, kids aren't bored anymore. They're on a device all the time. They're always thinking, looking at something, but not letting their mind wander. And I don't know about you, but my best ideas come when I'm falling asleep when I'm in the shower or when I'm going for a walk, when I'm not focused on anything else. Usually my mind wanders, and then some of the best things that I come up with are when I'm just kind of not thinking about anything at all. So I think, that's something that we have to kind of, and I'm guilty of this. I'm a workaholic. I have even got to give myself more time to try to just, let my mind wander to come up with some new things, because we just get so busy just trying to get so many things done. But if we could let ourselves just be, I think that we would actually come up with a lot more interesting brand new ideas. And the other thing, of course, is being in nature, being outside and seeing beautiful things that are just naturally in nature, I think promotes a lot of creative thinking too.
Well, Einstein, said publicly that some of his best ideas came from going for a walk. The Japanese have this expression, and it's a two-letter word. It's ma, and what it is, it's that moment of infinite possibilities. So if you throw something in the air, right before it comes down, that split second where everything is possible, um, this is it. And the only reason why it presents itself is because there's a you're not moving anywhere. You're just there. You can contemplate. You can see everything that is offered. And I think that is something that it's missing. I mean, listen, it demands a discipline to create that space because there's so many things going on. I mean, I've spoken to businessmen who used to really enjoy so much traveling on an airplane because it was the only time where they could be disconnected and their minds would be able to process, the information and kind of like take that forced pause and kind of, let these ideas come. Now, we fly and then we watch movies, or we're in the computer, we're doing business. But it is so important to find and to encourage and to nurture that ability for the younger generation to find those moments, because they are constantly nonstop on the schedule doing things. And the minute that suddenly the world around them stops, then they kind of freak out a little bit because they've never had this sense of boredom. You need to be bored. Absolutely true. I mean, you see your children. You don't have to share how old they are, but how difficult it is to teach them that pause that is so necessary for creativity.
Oh yeah, their devices are like crack, and you take them away, and they just about have a meltdown, And now we try to say to them just go use your imagination. I don't have an imagination. Well, you do have an imagination. Go outside, play. I don't know what it was like when you were a kid, but man, we went outside and mom had to drag us back in the house, because we were outside imagining adventures and playing all day long. And I definitely think that kids need more of that now. There's just too much information overload, and they are forgetting how to think for themselves a bit. So that's as much of a promoter of technology that I am. At the same time, I absolutely do believe that we need to remember to, and look, I'm guilty of this too. Like on planes, same thing. I loved it. Nobody could call me and I didn't have to do work. Well, now we have Wi-Fi, and I've got so much going on that even I'm guilty of I really should get some work done when I'm on this flight, and so it's a conundrum because now there's all these conveniences of technology, but then we also kind of forget that we need to shut down too sometimes, and not constantly have our mind be moving and thinking of something constantly all the time. So yeah, I mean, I love all this technology, but we definitely need to, I think, kind of take a step back and just be humans again, without relying on all of these devices at the same time to think for us.
Absolutely. So now, Christina, what's next with Aim Higher and all the other projects and organizations that the Purpose Entertainment, Space for a Better World. So in the next couple of years, what can we expect from your end?
So I plan to do a lot more outreach related to Aim Higher and, of course, through Space for a Better World. As a matter of fact, I'm right now, basically, I'm still in post-production for the gala, but one wonderful, beautiful thing that has come out of it is strengthening these relationships with these female astronauts, actually. So Sian Proctor, had been thinking about this, and she read my mind. She wants to be a Space for a Better World ambassador, and I'm gonna, be talking to some of the other astronauts about that. I mean, they already come out and help me and support me, and likewise, I go and support them however I can. And so, I want to do more events like I did with Atlanta, where I do more giant artwork projects in partnership with some communities and schools and local universities, to try to encourage young people about the opportunities where they live. And then I probably, when I did London, they were calling the gala, because we had an award ceremony, the Space Oscars. So I think, well, I guess maybe I'll start doing the Space Oscars every year. So we'll try to figure that out as well. But what I'm looking forward to the fall here is maybe doing a couple more astronaut escorted zero gravity flights, and then also potentially doing the 50th anniversary of Apollo 17. I mean, there's only one left, one more 50th anniversary of the Apollo missions. And so hopefully if that comes about, then I'll be planning for something like that in December. But my long-term vision, though, is to try to, like I said, connect the space curious with the space serious. I really want to try to create content and do some storytelling and some translating of space to people outside of the space world, to hopefully encourage more people to see a place for them within this. Because this, as I said before, this was not the plan for my life. And yet here I am, deep in space, working with lots of astronauts, lots of space explorers. And we call, especially with the women, we call each other space sisters, because we definitely have this shared kind of mission of trying to use our experience and our role in space in some way to inspire others. We feel a sense of responsibility. And I didn't fly to space yet, but I do rub shoulders with a lot of astronauts, and I've been very privileged to have worked with some of the most senior level people in space. So I feel a responsibility to try to do something good out of that, and through Space for a Better World and with the Aim Higher project. So there's going to be more coming up than I can even really explain, but the mission is an ongoing one for sure.
Now,
and I hope you and I get to do something together too, Daniel. We're working on trying to do stuff together too.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's obviously a lot to be said about women in space, but being surrounded by these inspiring women, how would you try to bring it down to a couple of like big information of wisdom coming from what are the women going to bring to this space, to the future of our species into outer space? What do you get from them?
Well, the interesting thing is, it was Poppy Northcutt who was saying, technically, women are better suited to go to space than men. In general, women weigh less, so it's less to launch. And then, actually, one interesting tidbit that I only learned recently was the men who've been at the space station for long duration missions, their eyeballs change shape, and it changes their vision, and it causes all kinds of issues when they come back to Earth. I didn't know this till recently, but Nicole Stott told me it only happens to men, not to women. So that's an interesting thing. And then the other part is, one thing that I really love is, like, with these events that I do, that the female astronauts have come, they literally have helped me hands on. They have actually literally, when we're laying out tiles of kids' space art, they will pick those boxes up and they will go lay those tiles. That's something and not to say that male astronauts won't do it, but I've actually never seen, I didn't have to ask them. And that's something about the spirit of the females helping other women in space that I really, really love, and I would like to see more of. So I hope that young girls too can see that and realize, that we're there to hopefully help welcome them into space. And I think that's something that, the guys can do, but definitely more girls, seeing more women in these leadership roles, welcoming them in, is a very powerful way to get more women and girls into space. I think that's going to be the most effective way to get people in, women and girls anyway.
Well, I think that the beauty of the human species is when we come together. Nature has created diversity, not just for the beauty of it, is because it creates resiliency. It's enriched the experience, and also life is created with these two energies. If it just wanted to have one direction, then it would have not, invested in creating these differences. And we're at the best. We're the best when we understand each what we can bring to the table, and we welcome what we can bring to the table, and we complement each other, and we build each other, moving forward. So I'm looking so much forward that future. I mean, I'm not. Don't call me naive. I'm not a naive person. I'm an extremely realist. I understand the problems that we have today, but I'm extremely hopeful um, as we move forward because there's a lot of greatness that's coming, and the women are at the center of it, and the men are part of that dialogue. And together, I think that we're going to be creating this vision of the future that is inspiring for a lot of people. Christina, all the links that
And
we're
that's
going
a
to put.
good point because the male allies are very important. Sorry to cut into you, but you're right. That's I don't want to say, oh, it's only going to be the women. I mean, the fact is that the allies, being allies, is a very powerful tool that I love when I see that having male allies and male mentors has been extremely important for me. So that's the other key element to all of this too.
Absolutely. Christina, we'll make all the links available. You're super active on Twitter, so we'll put that in. If people want to follow you, you're there. You're on LinkedIn, your Instagram, social media. You and I, we've talked about that. It's a necessary evil. We spend, we spend a lot of time investing because we need to share those ideas and those moments. We'll get all these links also for Aim Higher, Purpose Entertainment, and Space for a Better World, and for Nicole and Sian and all the other people that you support so that they can all come with you on your journey. So thank you so very much for spending the time.
Thank you, Daniel. Always wonderful to see you.
All right. See you soon.